instead of evacuating, I armored up a truck to drive myself out of here. Built that thing to be zombie-proof.
Holy shit!
Well, it turns out it was only 99% zombie-proof. Last 1% tore that truck to shit.
Oh, God, I hate malls.
Man, I love malls. I do. Once I was in this mall up in Atlanta, and these guys were dancing for like money and stuff, and my friend Dave and I was all like,
Ellis, is now the best time?
well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit.
Okay, so the evac station's abandoned,
Oh, Lord,
and
that's a
we're at the
big
center
ass
of a zombie-filled building.
Nick, hey, Nick.
On the bright side, we're all probably
that's
gonna
gross
die.
as hell. Time to get wet.
Look,
Nick,
we can just go
Thanks,
under
Nick.
the river. Doesn't that
I
sound
sure
like
was.
fun,
I thought
Ellis?
there'd be a couple rides at
That won't be
least.
the case.
Pissed at myself.
Go to
Nick,
hell.
For the
I
last
can't believe
time,
we're
I
walking
am
this
not
far
leaving
just
it
to keep a
behind.
damn car.
And don't you piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
I love doing that. I will never get
Just a
tired
car.
of that.
Just a car? That's like saying the Mona Lisa's just a sculpture or shit, man. That's like saying Jenny Gibbs is just a driver. That's like saying the girl on the bridge is just a little pretty.
Look, I don't have a problem leaving the car and you
Screw this.
behind.
I ain't leaving
Okay,
that car
Ellis?
behind. I'm going back for her.
We run to the tower,
Yeah.
and we turn off the alarm.
Spang.
Why is everything historic always so
Hey, Nick,
goddamn
you and
filthy?
me, we ought to
I'm
get
gonna
tattoos that say
that says
bros.
no.
Well,
I hate to be
screw
the bearer
me.
of bad news,
Nick,
guys,
Nick,
but unless
Nick,
Ellis
hey,
knows
Nick,
how to
hey,
build a
Nick.
monster truck,
Sorry,
we
folks.
ain't driving
This
through
car
this.
is capable of miracles, but it can't drive
God
over 20
damn you,
miles
Jimmy
apart
Gibbs
cars.
Jr.
That's not cool,
I do
Nick.
not like that
How
little
can you not
peanut
like
man.
little peanut?
Who the hell is Jimmy
I
Gibbs
love this
Jr.?
little guy.
I'm getting sick
You
of
guys
looking
are
at this
fake.
guy's
I used to
face.
have his toys when
Really?
I was just
Because
bite-sized.
he looks like an
That little
asshole.
stuffed
I got a
peanut
sinking
was the
feeling
best
this
friend
alarm's
we
going to
could
get us some
have.
attention.
Goodbye!